The sky over Iron Ridge was heavy with ash-gray clouds, the kind that weighed down on the shoulders of anyone who had to look up too long. Mud churned beneath boots in the auction yard, mixing with old blood and rainwater. A crow picked at something, unmentionable near the hitching posts, ignored by the crowd gathered under the stretched canvas and the half-broken sign that read, "Property sale, women included." Warren Harlow stood near the back. Tall, stooped, and silent, he looked more like a shadow than a man. His coat was worn raw at the elbows, the fur collar matted from years of weather and solitude. He didn't carry a gun, not today. Just an axe head strapped to his back with twine and leather. He hadn't spoken a word in 3 days, not since he left his cabin and hiked 30 miles into town with a note pinned to his chest that simply read, "Needed supplies he didn't plan." On staying long, he hated towns. The noise, the spit-slick streets, the way people looked at a man alone like he was either a drifter or a madman. But hunger was a cruel thing, and flour didn't grow on pine bark. The auction had begun without him meaning to notice. They were selling horses first, then some mules that looked half-starved. After that, the tone shifted. The sheriff stepped aside as a man in a dusty vest and red neckerchief clapped his hands and shouted, "And now female laborers. 4 of them. Strong arms, good teeth." The first woman was young, barely out of her teens. Her eyes were wild, darting between the crowd like a deer who already knew the bullet had been fired. Someone bought her for $6 and a saddle. The next went for 5. The third refused to walk, so 2 men dragged her up like a sack of grain and set her on display. The crowd laughed. The buyer spat and said she'd be broken in by the end of the week. Warren watched without blinking. Something inside him was still. Not unmoved dash, just ... sealed. He'd seen cruelty. Seen what men did when they thought no one would remember. Then came the last one. She shuffled forward with the potato sack over her head, the hem tied loosely at the neck so that the rough cloth hung like a veil. Her hands were bound in front with twine, her feet bare, caked in red mud. No sound came from her. She didn't resist, didn't plead, didn't flinch when the auctioneer grabbed her arm and raised it like a prize hog's. "Last one." "Don't all jump at once. She's quiet, strong enough to carry buckets. Probably got a mouthful of teeth, but I ain't checked." The crowd jeered. No one stepped forward. The auctioneer smirked. $2? Come on, boys. For the price of a bad haircut, you could have yourself a real mystery. A few men laughed. Someone shouted, "I'll give you 2 bullets and a flat beer." More laughter, and then Warren spoke. $2. It was a whisper compared to the bark and holler of the others, but it sliced through the noise like steel through pine. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked, then smiled like a man who just sold a rusted knife for silver. "Well, I'll be damned." Sold to the man with the dead eyes and the leather beard. The woman didn't lift her head as the twine was cut. She stood there, unmoving, until Warren stepped forward, coins in hand. The auctioneer slapped them into his palm and gestured. With a wink, "She's all yours, lumberjack." She followed Warren without a word. No one tried to stop them. No one cared. Outside town, Warren untied his horse, a heavy-coated gelding with the slow eyes of something that had seen a lot and cared little. The woman mounted with difficulty, and Warren said nothing, just swung up behind her and clicked the reins. The road into the forest was narrow and choked with brush. No one traveled it unless they had reason. His reason was buried under snow. Behind his cabin, marked with 2 wooden crosses he had carved with the same hands he used to fell trees, the ride was long and silent. The woman didn't speak. She didn't ask where they were going. At one point, a cold wind picked up and the sack fluttered against her neck, but she reached up and held it in place like it was armor. Warren didn't ask. Night fell fast in the mountains. Wolves howled in the far-off ridges, their cries curling like smoke over the peaks. Warren's cabin came into view just as the moon broke through the clouds. It was small, made of heavy timber, half sunk into a rise in the earth like the forest was trying to reclaim it. He helped her down. She winced when her bare feet hit the frozen ground. He opened the door, pushed it inward, and motioned with a nod. She stepped inside first. The warmth hit them like a wall. He'd left the fire banked, and it had kept the cold at bay. The cabin was simple. One table, 2 chairs, a cot in the corner, a cast-iron stove, and a row of wooden animals carved by hand, foxes, mares, lined up along the mantel. He didn't speak as he lit the lantern. She stood near the door, unsure. Finally, he pointed to the cot. "It's warm." She hesitated. Ben walked over slowly, each step hesitant as if she feared a trap. Warren busied himself with the kettle, pouring water into a dented pot and placing it on the stove. When he turned, she was sitting stiffly on the edge of the bed. He reached into the pantry, pulled out a tin of dried apples, and set it on the table. Then he did something he hadn't done in over a year. He sat opposite someone. The fire cracked. Wind moaned through the walls. Still, she didn't remove the sack. He cleared his throat, rough from disuse. "You hungry?" She nodded once. He slid the tin closer. She reached for it, hands trembling. He watched, not her fingers, not her mouth, but the way she moved. Like she expected pain. Like she was still somewhere else. He poured tea, passed it without a word. She took it. They sat in silence for what felt like hours. At last, she set the cup down and rose. Slowly, she reached behind her head and untied the cord holding the sack in place. It slipped free, sliding down to reveal her face. Warren didn't look. She stood there, exposed. Her hair was dark, tangled. Her cheeks sunken, eyes large and sharp. Scars crisscrossed the left side of her face, old ones, silvered over, healed but never forgotten. He stared into the fire instead, and then she spoke. Just one word, soft but clear. "Nam." He turned then, slowly, met her eyes. There was no shame in them, no fear. Only a question. She didn't explain. Didn't offer more. It wasn't her name, not exactly. It was something else. A declaration. A test. He didn't answer with words. He just nodded once, slow and sure, and rose to stoke the fire. Behind him, she breathed in deep for the first time. The cabin was still. But something had shifted. Not the wind, not the fire, something in him. And the world, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel quite so empty. The days that followed were built from the same wood Warren Harlow used to shape his world, quiet, solid, and unwilling to bend. Morning light filtered through the gaps in the shutters, illuminating the inside of the cabin in dusty gold, catching in the grain of the timber walls and the gray of his beard. The woman moved like a shadow through the space, neither a guest nor a prisoner, but something between the two. She still hadn't told him more than the one word. Nam. He hadn't asked for more. Questions he had learned, didn't always deserve. Answers. Asterisk, she wore a patched-up linen shirt that had once belonged to his late wife, and a pair of his old trousers cut off at the calves. She washed them in the creek, scrubbed them against river stones with hands too thin for comfort. When she worked, she hummed, not a tune he recognized, but one that rolled like water over rock. Soft, ancient, aching. Asterisk, Warren chopped wood from dawn till dusk. He didn't ask her to help, but she began sweeping the floor, oiling snow for washing, even stitching a hole in the curtain above the bed. She moved quietly, as if afraid to disturb the stillness he wore like a second skin. He let her be. He wasn't a man who asked things from others. Even before he'd lost his wife and child, he had never been much for words. Now he lived inside them like a cave. At night he carved. The firelight flickered over the small wooden animals he lined up on the mantel. His hands, rough as bark, moved with surprising care as he worked a block of pine into the shape of a fox. The silence in the room was never uncomfortable. If anything, it became a shared understanding. She didn't try to fill it. He didn't need her to. But silence does not mean peace. It just means the storm is waiting. On the fifth evening, she dropped a tin mug. It clanged against the wooden floor, and the sound cracked the air like a gunshot. She froze. Her breath hitched. Then she dropped to her knees and began whispering in a language she couldn't understand, gathering the mug with trembling fingers. He crouched down beside her. "You're not in danger here." She didn't look at him. Her hands kept moving. One rubbed the back of her neck, as if trying to scrub away something invisible. "You can breathe," he said. She looked up then. Her eyes were too big for her face, wide with memories she hadn't spoken of. She held up the mug like an offering. Her lips split from biting it too hard. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "You're not punished here," he said. She nodded, but he knew it would take more than words. He stood and walked to the stove, poured another mug of tea, and set it on the table. That night, she didn't sleep on the cot. She sat in the corner, her back to the wall, legs pulled up beneath her, arms wrapped tight around herself. He left a blanket nearby. She didn't take it. The next morning, there was a dead rabbit on the doorstep. Warren paused, knelt beside it. Clean kill. No torn flesh. A trap, maybe, but no snares around here. The snow had not been disturbed by anything with boots. He looked. Out across the clearing, movement, brief. A sliver of fur ducked behind a pine. A red fox. Its ears twitched. Then it vanished. She appeared beside him, barefoot despite the frost, her breath visible in the air. "You feed them?" he asked. She nodded once. "They follow me." He said nothing, just picked up the rabbit and brought it inside. She skinned and cooked it while he sharpened his axe. That night, she sat at the table. He placed a plate in front of her, and she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not wide, not showy, but soft. Earnest. He didn't return it. Couldn't. Smiles had become something foreign to him, something earned in another life, but something inside him warmed all the same. She pointed at the fox carving on the mantel. "You made that?" He nodded. "It's like the one who brought the rabbit." He didn't respond. She touched her chest. "Nam," she said again. He looked at her. The fire popped. Embers danced. "Does it mean your name?" She shook her head slowly. "It means daughter," she said, accent heavy, like each syllable carried stone. Daughter, he repeated. It was all I remembered. From my mother. Before ... Her voice trailed off. She folded her hands on her lap. "They took her. I was small. Sack over my head. Then the barn. Then the chains." His jaw clenched. He didn't ask who they were. The world was full of men who didn't need names to be damned. She looked at him with eyes that did not flinch. "Why? Did you buy me?" He answered after a long pause. "Because no one else did, and because I've buried too many things alone." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "I'm not a wife," she said. "I didn't ask for one." Not a servant. No. Then what am I? He thought about that. "Safe," he said. She didn't respond right away, but that night she took the blanket from the cot and laid it over both of them as she curled up at the far edge of the bed. The next day, she was waiting for him outside before sunrise. "I want to help," she said. He handed her a hatchet. She followed him into the woods. She swung the blade with more determination than skill, but he didn't correct her. The rhythm of work did more for a broken soul than conversation ever could. The cold wind bit their cheeks. Snow clung to their boots. Trees fell like thunder. At one point, she paused, breathing hard, sweat at her temples. He offered her water. She took it. She met his eyes. "I used to sing," she said, "in my village, before the fire." What happened? Men came. White, mostly. Some spoke our words. Said they were soldiers. Sighed we needed saving. He waited. They saved nothing. Burned everything. Took the girls. Left the rest for the crows. He didn't apologize. Words like sorry were too small for that kind of fire. He simply said, "They won't take you again." She nodded, and they returned to work. That night, the wind howled louder. Something outside scratched at the cabin wall. Warren rose, axe in hand, but it was just the fox. It sat at the edge of the porch, eyes shining in the dark. Numb. Snow had begun to melt in soft patches along the cabin's eaves, dripping into cold puddles that reflected a slowly awakening sun. Winter hadn't fully left the ridge, but it had begun its retreat. The trees were waking up, 2 branches twitching, with bird call and wind. Warren noticed the change in the sound of the forest before he saw it. It had a pulse again. A slow, beating rhythm. Nam had changed with it. She laughed now, quietly, still, but the sound was real, uncoiled from somewhere deep inside her. She spent her mornings steeping herbs she'd foraged, humming as she crushed dried leaves between her palms. Warren watched her, sometimes pretending not to. But he noticed things. The way she moved with confidence now. The way she no longer flinched at dropped tools or shadows at the window. Trust had rooted itself between them. Not spoken, not named. Just there. That afternoon, Warren carved a small bear for her. She took it with both hands, ran her thumb across its back, and said, "He looks like you." Then, without pause, added, stubborn, big, quiet, "He didn't." Smile. Not fully. But the corners of his mouth twitched. They ate together, spoke more freely. Her language slipped into his vocabulary. She taught him her word for fire, for fox, for safe. In return, he taught her to throw an axe. She was terrible at first, then better than him in 2 weeks. She laughed when her blade split a pine log dead center. The forest had become their neighbor. No longer a threat, but an extension of their world. The fox came more often now, sometimes waiting by the porch in the morning, tail curled like a brushstroke. Nam fed it slivers of salted meat. She whispered to it. It listened. But peace, in the Wild West, was never a long-term tenant. The men came 2 weeks into thaw. Warren spotted them first, 3 riders weaving between the trees beyond the clearing. He watched from the cabin window, hand resting on the axe near the door. Their horses were ragged but fast, their saddles worn by long rides and longer tempers. He recognized one of them, the man with the red neckerchief from the auction yard, the one who'd laughed when Warren paid $2 for the sack-headed woman. Warren stepped outside, slow and deliberate. Nam stood at the stove. She saw his face and said nothing. She followed him out. The men rode up bold, grinning like coyotes. The one in front leaned forward in his saddle, spitting a wad of tobacco into the dirt. "Well, I'll be, if it ain't the woodsman and his pet ghost." Warren didn't answer. We came looking for something, the man said. Or should I say someone? Nam stepped behind Warren. The fox darted into the trees. Don't be shy now, the second man called. We were promised her first. I got coin in my pocket says she's still up for sale. She's not. For sale, Warren said flatly. The man grinned, all teeth and rot. You bought her. We're just here to renegotiate. No. That ain't a no you want to be giving. Warren's hand hovered near his belt. No gun, just the weight of. His axe. The third man dismounted, cocky. He walked toward the porch like it already belonged to him. Nam reached for Warren's arm. Don't, she whispered. The man on the porch laughed. What's she saying? Don't? Don't what? Don't take her? Don't burn this place down? He struck the railing with the butt of his rifle. Wood splintered. Warren moved fast. Not loud. Not wild. Just fast. One step forward, then the axe was up. The blade hissed through the air, sunk into the post beside the man's hand. He jumped back, fell into the snow. His partners reached for their rifles, but Warren had already pulled the axe free and raised it again. Nam shouted something sharp in her native tongue. It stopped everything. Even the wind paused. The three men looked at her. The sack she had once worn was gone. She stood tall, eyes hard. The one in red scowled. You got fire in you now, girl? You think he'll keep you safe forever? She didn't answer. He spat again. We'll be back, with more. Then they turned. The one who fell cursed and limped back to his horse. Snow churned under hooves. They vanished into the woods. Warren didn't move. Nam stood beside him, shaking slightly. That night, she did not sleep. Neither did he. She packed a small satchel with dried meat and herbs, tucked the wooden bear into it. He noticed. You're leaving? He asked. She looked at the fire. If they come back, they'll burn this place. They'll kill you. I'm the reason. You're not the reason. She shook her head. They want what they think I am. Something to control. Something to take. You're not leaving. I won't cost you your life. You already gave it back to me. Her eyes filled then, slow, like water rising behind a dam. I'm not strong, she whispered. You're still here. I'm scared. So am I. She blinked, startled by his honesty. I buried my wife in the snow, he said. Buried. My son beside her. I don't bury things anymore. I fight for them. Her shoulders dropped. The bag fell from her hand. In the dark. Outside, the fox cried. Morning came cold and sharp. The trees stood tall and grim. Smoke rose in the distance. Not from a chimney. From fire. They were coming. Warren handed Nam the shotgun from the mantel. She took it with steady fingers. I've never fired one. You only need one shot. The clearing was too wide to hide in. Warren stood by the door, axe in hand. Nam took position by the fence. Her braid was tied with the red string she used for binding. Herbs. The men came with 4 more. 7 total. 1 carried a torch. The man in. Red shouted, last chance. Send her out, and we walk away. Warren didn't answer. The torch flew. It landed on the roof of the woodshed. Flames took quickly. Smoke rolled. Then gunfire. Sharp. Fast. Nam squeezed the trigger. 1 rider fell. The others scattered. Returned fire. Warren moved like thunder. Crossed the yard in 5 steps. Axe rising, falling. Screams followed. The shed roared behind them. Fire licking the air. Nam ran for cover. Bullets snapped past her. She dropped behind the trough, reloaded the shotgun, hands trembling. Warren took a shot to the arm, but didn't fall. He kept moving, cutting down the man who lit the torch. 3 men turned and fled. 1 remained, red neckerchief. He raised his. Pistol at Nam. She didn't hesitate. The shot echoed through the ridge. He fell, then silence. Smoke drifted like fog through the clearing. The shed was gone. Part of the porch had caught, but was smothered. Warren sat against the wall, clutching his arm. Nam knelt beside him. "You're hurt," she said. "I've been worse. You saved me." He smiled this time. Real, tired, full of pain and something else. "No," he said. "You saved me again." She leaned into him, forehead against his. The fox returned at dusk, sitting beside the fire pit, watching. That night, they didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Their world had been claimed by flame, by blood, by courage drawn from places neither of them knew existed. And still, they were here, alive, together. The cabin would need repairs, but the roots were deep, and the fire inside them was just beginning. The world had turned green again, soft wild green that crept up the slopes of Iron Ridge like it had forgotten what fire was. Wildflowers bloomed in the places where ash once coated the earth. The trees that hadn't burned stood taller now, straighter as if defying memory. Birds returned with their songs, and for the first time in years, Warren Harlow no longer woke to silence. Asterisk, he stood at the edge of the cabin porch, sharpening the head of a new axe. The old one, the one that had split firewood and bone alike, now hung above the hearth like a retired warrior. The sky above him was heavy with rolling gray clouds, but the kind that promised rain, not danger. Behind him, inside the cabin, Nam was laughing. Asterisk, her laughter was rare, still raw, sudden, never forced. When it came, it filled the walls like smoke, curling into every corner. This time, it came from something small, a book she was reading. She'd begun learning the written word slowly, stubbornly, shaping each letter like she was whittling it out of wood. She read aloud sometimes. Sometimes she sang instead. Her voice was stronger now. She no longer whispered. Asterisk Warren paused his sharpening, listening. That sound hers was what home had become. Asterisk, she stepped out onto the porch, holding the mug. He'd carved her last winter, steam curling out like breath in cold air. She was barefoot. She often was. The grass liked her, and she liked it back. Her braid hung loose today, the red thread long since replaced by one of copper. She stood beside him, looking out into the trees. Asterisk, I saw the fox again this morning. She said. Asterisk, he nodded. It never left. Asterisk, he brought something. A rabbit skull. Asterisk, gift. Asterisk, warning. Asterisk, maybe both. She sipped her tea, then turned to him. Do you remember the first thing I ever said to you? Asterisk, he nodded again, slower. Nam. Asterisk, she smiled gently, not just with her lips, but with her whole body, like the words still echoed through her bones. I didn't say it to be mysterious. I said it because I didn't remember my name. I didn't know what else I had left. You had yourself, he said. I didn't think that was enough. But now, she looked out again, her voice softer. Now I know it was everything. Asterisk Warren didn't speak. His silence wasn't the kind that pushed people away anymore. It was the kind that invited them to fill it however they needed. She'd taught him that. She'd taught him a lot of things. Asterisk, that evening, they sat by the fire, a stew of mushrooms and wild roots simmering between them. Nam added herbs without measuring. Warren trusted her now the way someone trusts a rising sun. He watched her movements, confident, clean, without hesitation. She was not the woman who had arrived at the auction with a sack over her head. That woman was gone, buried, burned, and from her ashes something fierce had risen. Asterisk, she reached into the small wooden box by her feet and pulled out a smooth stone. On it she had carved two symbols, one in his language, one in hers. She handed it to him. "It means begin," she said. He turned the stone over in his calloused palm. It was smooth, but the symbols were sharp, fresh. "What are we? Beginning?" Asterisk, she didn't answer. Not yet. Asterisk, that night, when they lay side by side under the quilt she'd sewn from old scraps, she placed his hand gently on her belly. Her heart pounded beneath his fingertips. For a moment he thought she might change her mind. But then she spoke, the words coming slow and low, like wind pushing through high grass. Asterisk, "You asked me once what Nam meant." Asterisk, he nodded. Her voice was warm against the hollow of his throat. Asterisk, "I told you it meant daughter. That's true. But in my village, in my mother's tongue, it also meant something else." Asterisk, he looked down at her. She wasn't looking back. She was staring at the ceiling beams, eyes wide, seeing something far away. Asterisk, "It meant I am," she said. The silence between them became full. He didn't ask what she meant. He understood. Asterisk, the next day, they began clearing a patch of earth near the edge of the woods, not far from the graves. Warren worked the soil, while Nam gathered seed from the satchel she'd kept hidden behind the hearth. They planted squash and beans and 2 rows of wildflowers. She knelt down and pushed the seeds gently into the dirt, like they were bones she was returning to the earth. Her fingers were stained with loam. Her face was calm. Asterisk, when the sun began to fall behind the hills, she looked at the patch of disturbed earth and said, "I want her to know this place." Asterisk Warren stood beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. "Who?" Asterisk, she placed her hand again on her stomach. This time, he did not have to ask. Asterisk, the wind stirred the leaves above them, and far off, the fox cried. Asterisk, for the next month, their life moved like river water, slow, deep, and never once still. Warren carved a cradle. Nam painted it with berries. And ash. They gathered herbs, dried fruit, and built shelves for a pantry they had never needed before. He spoke more now, not just to her, but to the baby growing inside her, to the fox, to the trees. Words had returned to him, not because he wanted them, but because she made space for them. Asterisk, sometimes at night, she would sing, not lullabies yet, but songs from her childhood, half-remembered and shaped by fire. He would sit and listen, eyes closed, her voice making something whole again inside him. Asterisk, then one night she woke him with a whisper, not from pain, not from fear, just his name. He turned toward her, and she took his hand, pressed it again to her belly. She moved, she said. He waited. Asterisk, then he felt it. A flutter. A small, stubborn push against the inside of the world. He stared at her in the dark. She said Nam. He whispered. She smiled in the dark, and this time she cried. The final frost came late that year. They spent the day collecting firewood, stacking it in rows that smelled of pine and old bark. Nam bent slower now, and Warren stayed closer to her side. She would scold him for hovering, then pull him close when she thought he wasn't expecting it. They danced once. A slow, awkward sway in the clearing. No music, no steps, just laughter and movement, and the kind of love that doesn't need words to be understood. Asterisk, on the evening of the first real spring rain, they sat beneath the porch roof again. The fox curled beside her feet. Warren held her hand. Asterisk, she turned. To him, serious now. Asterisk, I want to name her Nam. Asterisk, he hesitated, then nodded. I was hoping you would. She looked out at the trees. When a woman says Nam, she said slowly, she means more than just that she lived. She means she remembered. She means she did not forget the girl she used to be, or the fire that took her, or the silence that held her after. She means she became what they thought she couldn't. She turned back to him, And when a child says it, she'll know that too. Asterisk Warren didn't speak. He couldn't. He only pulled her hand into his chest and held it there, beneath. The weight of everything they had survived. Asterisk. The rain came harder then, drumming on the roof, blurring the trees into shadow. Inside, the hearth fire flickered. Nam leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. And she was right. They never would be again. Asterisk, if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. In the comments, some names aren't given, they're claimed. And when a woman says Nam, the world listens. Asterisk,